to the premiere podcast of PM Today, a podcast with a purpose. Join us as we take a humanitarian perspective and a collaborative approach to project management, propagating discussion to find solutions to the new world challenges facing nonprofit and community-based organizations today. Our first topic to tackle is on artificial intelligence. What does this new advent in technological advancement mean to nonprofits and to community-based organizations? Is there reason to be concerned? Is humanity at risk? Find out on the premiere episode of PM Today, Demystifying Artificial Intelligence, with guest speaker and subject matter expert Paul Boudreau. Paul is an information systems professional, certified project manager through PMI, and MBA graduate with over 25 years of project management experience. Also joining us today is Courtney Madruga. Courtney is a project management consultant and also manages operations at Stone Meadow Consulting. So we begin our discussion on this provocative yet important subject on this episode of PM Today, Demystifying Artificial Intelligence. Paul, you're the president of Stone Meadow Consulting. You wrote 3 books on the subject of artificial intelligence. Your first book is actually Applying Artificial Intelligence to Project Management. And then your second book is How the Project Management Office Can Use AI to Improve the Bottom Line. And your third book is Silent Resistance. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and just give me a brief overview of your books, starting with the first one again.
Sure. The first one, Applying AI to Project Management, that's the basic intro. It talks about common words and phrases, tries to get you into the terminology. And this whole wave that's coming at us with artificial intelligence, and there's a lot of vendors that are out there now. And as project managers, we want to learn a little bit about this and not just, come at it from a point of view of knowing nothing. Book two is at a higher level. So whereas book 1 was project managers, book 2 is the project management office. And it talks a bit about, it's more about the value. What's the value of using AI in project management? And as well, it goes into a lot more depth in the tools. So what tools are being used and why they're important for project management. Now, book three, Silent Resistance, it's already got a great movie title, but it's not about project management at all. It's about communication and understanding AI as an employee. So really the first 2 books are project management. Book 3 is about employees.
Book 1, going back to your first 2 books again, you give a good synopsis of how AI can be used in project management and so forth. So what exactly is AI?
That's a great question. And there's a lot of people who just don't understand it. So let me say it this way. At its core, AI is a software program. It's code. It's software code. And in that code, it uses loops. So for loops, for 1 to 10, do this. And iterations. There's iterations in this code that it goes through the code over and over again. It's very common in software programming. And what happens is these iterations are used to go over and over to find correlations in the data. And the logic that's used in this are mathematical equations. AI is based on calculus. Right. So it wants to do something called gradient descent to find the best correlation in a vast set of data. Okay. And, for project management, this means the ability to correlate more data than is really humanly possible and to do it faster. I mean, think about all the project management out there. I mean, in your career, in my career as a project manager, let's say over 20 years, every project I've ever done. I mean, I can't remember them. Can you?
No, I can't. I'm too old.
So what happens is, if we have this vast database, this storage of project management data, then maybe we can use tools like machine learning and AI to correlate that data and use it to make better decisions. It's like AI is the single vast experience of all project managers wrapped into one.
Okay, so this is much different than just automation then. This goes beyond just database automating, relational systems like that. This goes a little bit beyond that. What's that that leap beyond.
But machine learning allows us to build a reference model. We talk to clients, if they don't have enough data, we say, listen, use a Pareto chart or buy a software program like MathWorks, right? Correlate your data that way. But based on these correlations, we can use it to make decisions. So for example, we have a template in a neural network that I created. Mm-hmm. And we take a bunch of historical data, and based on that data, we build this model that says, okay, let's predict if a project is going to be successful or not. And what happens is we have models of projects that have been successful. So what's the image? What is that image of a project that looks like it's going to be successful? And we create that image, just like an image of a dog or a cat. And now we present a new image. Here's an image of a project that we don't know what's going to happen to it. What do you think? Is it going to be successful or not? Let me make that prediction.
Let me wrap my head around this. So what you're saying, basically, the main difference or the advantage or the extra mile that AI goes is based on predictability.
It does two things. It does prediction and classification. It can predict whether your project is going to be successful or not. It can predict whether your communication plan is going to be successful or needs to be revised. Then there's classification. Classification is used to classify similar or common items. And we can use that to classify risks, for example, to classify scope documents. Are these scope documents the same or different? And if they're different, did I miss something here?
Okay, so it's not so much just that you have a document, because anybody could have a document, title it, but the content in the document is being analyzed somehow.
Yeah, we have the other part of AI is called natural language processing, NLP. And natural language processing, what it does is it interprets both human language, verbal, and text documents. And there's a lot of opportunity here where it can identify errors in documents. And it does something called sentiment analysis. So based on conversations or based on messages, it can assess whether project team members are frustrated or happy with their project tasks. And based on that, as project managers, we go back and maybe revisit the communication plan or maybe go talk to a project team member.
Let me ask you this, especially in an operations standpoint. Do I need to retrain all of my staff? Is there a big learning curve? And if we do implement AI in our operations or our projects, what about our jobs? Should we be concerned?
From an operations standpoint, at least in my experience over the past year, the people that we've spoken with internationally and also in North America, they are more in that educational space. As Paul's highlighted many times before, AI is a little bit behind in the project management field, to say the least.
Okay.
So right now, it's definitely an interest, and people are far more on the information sharing side, where people are wanting to learn, host workshops, and learn how to streamline their processes and be open to that. Right now, I think it's more of an opening doors process than actually into place, at least from my perspective. Paul might have something.
Yeah, well, Al, I want to just pick up on this and see if you're getting into the, this common question we get is AI going to take over my job?
Right.
Is that where you're going with this?
I mean, there are concerns, and it kind of runs right into my next question. What are the concerns? What are the risks?
Okay, let's do the risks first.
Okay.
And I'll say this: AI is an amazing opportunity. It's not really a risk. There's a lot of skeptics, and that's one of the biggest things we have to overcome. When I do presentations, people ask me, well, who's using it, and does it really work? And, Al, because you've been so good to us and we've been working with you, I'm going to let your listeners in on a little secret. Last year, Courtney and I, we got a call last year from this company out of New Jersey. And we spent a bit of time working with this pharmaceutical company. Right. And I can't mention their name, but I can say that they are now one of the pharmaceutical companies that's delivering the vaccine.
Wow.
So I'm not claiming any credit.
Right.
But they talked about how can we improve our project processes. And isn't that an area where you want to have the best project processes possible to get a vaccine to people, to save lives? So if you think AI is a risk, I'm saying it's an opportunity. And the biggest issue that we have is understanding this technology. This is not technology where you plug it in and start using it. As Courtney was talking about, there's this learning curve. We need to learn the terminology. We need to figure out how to interpret the results.
Right.
We need to learn how much data we need. What is supervised learning? What is unsupervised learning? Read my book, you'll find out. So, you know what? Vendors can sell you software and give you results, but you really do need to understand how this all works. It's not that technical once you get on it. Courtney, you can attest to this, right? Courtney's been working with it from a project management point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't have a tech background whatsoever, no software, anything. And once you open your mind to it and seeing, I think the biggest perspective change for a lot of people will be seeing how it can directly impact them or the world around them. For me, I have a social sciences background, and some of the opportunities that even Paul spoke to me about when we first started of, hey, if this was used in these different social contexts, wouldn't that benefit us in a great way? So when you see it in a way that's applicable to your interests, your profession, whatever you specialize in project wise, and you see it as the opportunity it is, that's when people's minds open to learning further. You don't have to be a data scientist to understand how it can help you in your organization and how you can change to reap the benefits.
Right. What are the next steps for an organization?
I want to take you back though, Al. We didn't go over will AI take over my job? That's a fear that I get that all the time. Okay. Never in the history of technology development has technology reduced the total jobs. It really hasn't.
Okay.
What's going to happen is we're going to see some automation of project manager tasks, things like status reports, things like maybe organizing meetings. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, project managers are going to have to start training a little bit differently. They're going to have to learn a little bit about more about statistics and making decisions based on data, because we're moving in that direction. We're moving away from processes into making decisions based on data, and that's going to make the project more successful. The other big concern, and I'll just address this, Al, because I know you're in California, and that is, will AI one day become, sentient and take over the world? Right? Oh my gosh. I tell people, no, robots are not going to become alive and take over the world. That's called entertainment. And there's a lot of entertainment. You're down there in that movie business in California. And there's all these creative people who say, let's do this. Let's get a robot that starts to kill people. Let's get a robot. It's entertainment, guys. Even the highest level of academics who are working on AI, they don't, they say AI, it's not possible that AI or a robot's going to become alive and one day suddenly decide to go into the kitchen and make breakfast for itself because it's hungry.
And Paul, that's all well and good until it actually happens, though. When your toaster has something to say to you.
The danger is that we don't use it properly as any other technology.
Yeah.
So
now in the context of organization, I think this kind of leads into your second book, applying AI to reduce the bottom line. Okay. And that's really important to many of my clients because I work with a lot of mid to small nonprofits. So when it comes to the resources and things like that, bottom line is extremely important. So how can a small or medium nonprofit benefit from integrating AI within projects within their daily operations? And
even with the adaptation of AI to small businesses or smaller operations, I think it poses even a greater value than it would to some of the organizations who would be the first to adapt it because they may have more data, they may have more money or financial backing, depending on that. But for those smaller organizations, using their resources appropriately is the most important. They don't have extra resources. So if anything, Paul's spoken about this plenty in some of his workshops, is AI is a learning curve, and adapting it and adapting to it, it's something that you have to start at the bottom to understand. So for small organizations, it's not a waste of resources to start learning and to start seeing, yes, how can we organize our data? How can we collect it so that when we are ready, when we do have a collaboration of people to work together or join a repository or anything, we need to have our data organized in a way that we can optimize our resources and use this tool appropriately to benefit us far more than repeating past practices that don't necessarily work.
Courtney, you mentioned, and I'm just wondering, you mentioned data repositories, and now maybe, Paul, you could chime in on this. The question is this: what about a nonprofit or an organization that may not have a substantial amount of data? Is that an issue? How can they overcome that obstacle?
There's an answer to that. There's this common misconception that you need to have vast amounts of data for AI to work. And that's true sometimes, but it's not always true. And yes, in the medical field, you need a lot of data. If you're analyzing X-ray images to detect pneumonia, for example, in children, you need a lot of data. There's a lot of pixels in those images.
Right.
In business, we don't need as much. Okay. And there's a couple of ways we can do this. First of all, there are vendors out there now who will capture your data in their own tool. So, for example, they will hook up to an MS Project or Liquid Planner, whatever you use, and it captures all of your project data in a repository, and they call this a knowledge repository. And then you have your own knowledge repository, and as you complete projects over time, you gain benefit from that, because the machine learning tools will go back and correlate data from your knowledge repository. What makes you successful? What makes your projects successful? Okay. And not only that, but some vendors are collecting this data, and what they do is they might have the data already.
Right.
So, for example, if they're working with 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different organizations, they may come already with some formulas for success, call it. You know how you're working on Excel, and Excel has these functions. You don't have to go and create every single function. It's already embedded there. Some vendors are doing that already.
They're building on each other, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this leads into the last one I want to mention quickly here is the other opportunity is collaborate with other businesses. And I mentioned this in my book as well, is if you're a small association, you're a nonprofit, surely there's others like you out there, and you probably belong to like a small business association or a small business network.
Right.
Well, here's the opportunity to share your project management data as a small organization. And we're not talking about anything really super confidential. We're talking about project data. And if you're worried, you can submit it anonymously. And you can build up. There is a business now just started working on some research in the US out of Texas, where they're looking at building repositories for organizations and allowing them to pool or share their data. It's the first one I've heard in North America. There are 2 or 3 that are in Europe right now.
To see things like open source and repositories and things like that, especially for nonprofits, and you're not dealing with proprietary information or anything like that, I think that's the way to go. If somebody was really listening to this podcast right now and going, you know what, I have to check this out, what are the next steps for an organization?
What do you do?
Yeah.
It's always data first. So what project data do you have? What form is it in? Is it in Word? Do you have a scope document in Word? Do you have Excel? What's your scheduling tool? What do you use? Is your data structured? And that means, do you have a consistent format to it? I've done data transfers before, from one system to another. And, different format. Date fields are month, day, year, month, day. There's a lot of inconsistency. So do you have clean, consistently formatted data? And then think about using data to make decisions. Like, as I said before, when we start off with our clients, they usually don't have the right data or enough data. And then that's where we help out. We do this little, can I say free? We do this free assessment for them and say, hey, listen, here's some more appropriate data fields you should be capturing, and send them back a little report. But the first steps are, listen, do a Pareto chart, 80-20 rule, or do some data mining. There are data mining tools out there where I've got this data. Can I just capture some insights without getting full on into AI?
Right.
And then, from that point, you go into the machine learning and AI world. And it's mainly about, for us, it's mainly about research and education, because we're trying to push this forward. We're trying to get this really into project management, because there's so much waste and failure in project management that it's really important now to get this going. And I just saw an article actually today. There's a company in the UK. They are doing AI for project management in the construction industry.
Right.
And Google just gave them a massive investment to continue work in that field.
So there are other opportunities for organizations to implement AI through philanthropy and just the giving of individuals and organizations.
Yeah, exactly. In the non-project world, if I was to say the big people into AI, Google is the first one, of course. Right. Facebook uses natural language processing. Amazon uses it to tell you what to buy next, right? And Microsoft's big into it. So if you have small organizations out there, nonprofits, you know what? Maybe it might be an opportunity for them to connect with one of those big guys and say, can you give me some help here?
Right. Now, how does somebody get in touch with you, and what services are you offering? And let me give you the final word here. stonemeadow-consulting.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn. My name, Paul Boudreau, Boudreau. Just type in Paul Boudreau AI or Paul Boudreau Ottawa, Canada, and you should see me pop up. And we do mainly research. So I'm doing research. I write software code, getting involved in different things. We do educational programs, workshops. I do presentations, and I work with vendors. So I'm not a vendor. I'm not in space. I don't want to be a vendor. But if organizations are thinking, well, what vendor is right for me? Then, maybe I can, head you in that direction. And listen, if somebody sends me an email, I don't mind replying and letting you know and give me some tips on that. Email is, you ready for it? P as in Paul, Boudr, PBOUDR at Rogers, ROGERS.com. Very good. Courtney.
So you can reach us at same thing at the Stone Meadow Consulting site, or you can contact me directly via email. My email is Madruga, MADRUGA, Courtney, COURTNEY @gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you both for coming on. I know you're very busy. I know your schedules are extremely tight. The time went by way too fast, and now I have about 100 more questions for you, so we'll have to try to do this again sometime. So I want to thank again Courtney Madruga and Paul Boudreau from Stone Meadow Consulting.
Thanks,
Bye.
Al. Take care. Stay safe.
Until next time, this is Al Marin with PM Today, wishing you a fruitful life and Godspeed.